My name is Ruffin Rhodes.
My name is Naniela Ogbodo.
My name is Stanley Evans II.
My name is Kelly Addison.
I am Black.
I am a professional.
And I'm an architect.
And it all matters.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Inside Voices Black Thoughts. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. Inside Voices Black Thoughts is a forum that was created to give voice and give space to talk about issues that are not frequently talked about, those that directly affect the Black community. And when we say Black, we mean the entire African diaspora. So I would like to welcome you all tonight, as well as thank all of our planners and our sponsors. So thank you to Black Architects in the Making, both the BAM Orlando chapter as well as BAM Miami, the National Organization of Minority Architects South Florida, as well as the National Organization of Minority Architects Orlando chapter, the Orlando Foundation for Architecture, AIA Orlando, as well as AIA Miami. I would like to also thank tonight's sponsors, Interior Contract Services, for sponsoring tonight's event. My name is Vanessa Smith-Torres. I am the president of South Florida NOMA, or SoFlo NOMA as we'd like to call it. And I just wanted to give you guys, before we get started with our exceptional panel tonight, some background and some information as to why we are here. So Whitney Young at the AIA convention gave a powerful speech, really challenging the architectural profession to do better, right? And so one of the things that he said was that only when our profession reflects the demographic composition of the society that we serve will we truly be on the right track. And there's a lot of work still to do. So I just wanted to share a few statistics with everybody. So in these graphics, you'll see each little person represents 1,000 architects. And there are about 116,000 registered architects right now in the United States. Of those, the grays are the female architects, and the black are the Black architects, both male and female. So out of the 116,000, we are less than 3,000 Black architects total, and only 502 Black female architects. And why does that happen? What's really interesting is I say so often, if they can see it, they can be it. And that is, representation matters is not just a hashtag, but it's proven, it's science in any industry, in any profession. Here, Johns Hopkins studied that just representation in education, for students to see Black teachers, to have Black teachers, actually increases their likelihood of attending colleges. And so as that pipeline continues and students register in architecture schools, 40% of students identify as white, but 65% of the faculty are white. So the profession, as it continues, just continues losing diversity. In fact, the Black enrollment in NAB programs has stayed stagnant, where non-residents is the diverse demographic that keeps growing. And you can see it just as the career progresses. So this is from NCAR by the Numbers 2020. There's about 44%, almost half of the candidates that are starting, new record holders who are just starting out in the architectural careers, are people of color. But you see how that orange, that white bar just keeps growing as the career progresses, from taking the AREs to finishing the AREs, to becoming certificate holders, to becoming firm leaders, to becoming firm owners. So 66% of Americans of African Americans do not see themselves reflected in firm leadership because there's so few firm leaders of color. And so what's really interesting is how that turns into starting their own practices. In all of Black businesses, not just architecture, 34% of them say because that they start their business because they want to be their own bosses. They want to have that control. And so tonight we have a fabulous panel, an international panel for you all. And I'd like to introduce them to you. So first we have Tosin Oshinawo, who is a registered architect in the Federal Republic of Nigeria and a member of the Royal Institute of British Architects. She is a founding member of the African Alliance for New Design, which is a think tank that explores the value of design for the current generation of creatives on the continent, which is really exciting. Welcome, Tosin.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Vanessa. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Susan Wampa Gillespie. She's the founder of Wampa Design. She's a Nigerian-American architect and interior designer based in Southern California. And she is an artist and activist. So welcome, Susan.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Next is Anson Stewart. So Anson is the founder and principal of Stewart Architecture, based a little bit more locally here in Lauderhill, Florida. He is also a member of the South Florida National Organization of Minority Architects and an adjunct professor of architect at Florida Atlantic University, as well as many other hats that he wears. But welcome, Anson.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
And Terry Watson. Terry is the owner and founder of Yen Studio, which is located in Miami. She is also the founder of the Neighborhood Architects, which is a network, a collective, which locates minority architects and design professionals in the local communities. Welcome, Terry.
Hi, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, so right off the bat, tell us, Anson, why don't you kick us off? What really inspired you to start your own practice?
I'll be honest, just burnout. I'll just be straight up. I think I was working for a construction firm as a project manager, and just the long hours. I always knew I wanted to have my own firm at some point. I think that was the straw that kind of broke the camel's back, so to speak, that kind of pushed me over the limit, pushed me over that boundary and that hurdle, and my apprehensions for doing so. So I think it was timing more than anything. I had prepared for it. So I think just burnout and tired of working for someone else and wanting to see what I could do on my own.
I can chime in too. Also similar, a lot of burnout, kind of in that place in life where you're just kind of evaluating, does your life work for you? And just kind of looking at how could it be different? You know, I had worked at firms for a long time and, you know, just I was in my mid-30s at the time and just kind of looking at, okay, I do want to be on a partner track. You know, it's kind of good to like accept what you want for yourself, right? And just looking at whether that was possible for me in my current situation and what my options are. And then too, I agree, just kind of wanting to see what you could do, see what you're made of. And like, that was actually a really important kind of personal growth element of it for me that has been great. So yeah, it's kind of, you just kind of have to like make that leap sometimes.
I'd like to add to that actually. So, I mean, apart from, I mean, it's so important to be able to control your time and be able to plan your life around your work and enjoy that process. But I think I was also quite bored. I wasn't doing exciting design work, and I really wanted to do design and to create a design language that I was known for, as opposed to you're in the box of an existing organization and they have their language, they have their structure, and you have to just fall into line. You know, if you're very particular about design, then it's much easier for you to kind of step out and own your space and start to create that language that people will follow.
I totally agree. Like defining that voice for yourself, because when you work for someone else, at like if you're doing a good job, you're learning how to work in their voice, you know, so you can represent that, and that's what you hope the people that work for you do. So eventually, you kind of have to decide: is that something I want to put out there?
And there's a healthy balance in that, because not everybody can be a boss, you know, and it's important to know where you fall and where you sit in this stratosphere of the profession. And it's not for everyone to own their own business, but if you are going to go that mile, then you have to have conviction of character to be able to hold it through.
I'm glad you said that, Toshin, because I wanted to chime in on what you said about when you talked about wanting to create your own design language. You know, maybe that's not for everybody. You know, you have to really see that and want that in yourself. But if you're finding that you're constantly questioning why you are somewhere, then maybe it is time to make that move. So you do have to be passionate about wanting to do that for yourself.
And architecture is a team sport, right? I mean, you need people to do the amount of work that it takes, right? So there's value. I think that wherever you work at whatever job, there's something of value to be learned, you know, even from the beginning, the very bottom. And so it's kind of like, I think the trick is to learn what you can learn and then know when to move on, or if you should move on, or if you need to kind of, you know, create a new place for yourself within that organization, if it's even possible.
I just want to chime in too. For myself, I was actually encouraged to start my own company by a Black female architect that I actually had the pleasure of working for. So coming right out of graduate school, I was able to kind of get that encouragement, because I think I've expressed to her that, you know, I knew that I wanted to work for smaller companies and kind of learn more and be a part of the architecture process, the build process from beginning to end. And with the, you know, economics and the tax brackets behind that of what a small company can provide you, she offered me that piece of advice, and which led me to understanding the consulting side of being an architectural designer and getting experience with multiple people. So that was my introduction into becoming a little bit independent on that side.
So I think that's something interesting that someone said, hey, you should start your company, get your LLC, get your name and all that. What would you say is like, for all of you, what's this like single best piece of advice you've gotten along the way?
Yeah, that was my best single piece of advice, honestly, because, you know, when you're in school, you don't really get the encouragement of being able to get experience by being on your own. You're mostly forced to think of the traditional way of, you know, go get a good job at a big firm and learn and get your experience there. And I think that is still a good advice for students. But also, as all the other panelists have mentioned, you know, it's a benefit to know kind of the track you want to go on or you're most interested in, so that you can make the appropriate calls early on and get those experiences. And it won't stop you from joining a team later or doing anything it's, you know, that you can do in the future, but it kind of helps you, again, control the time, control at least like the projects that you're able to work on, and the people you're able to work with, that comes along with choosing as an independent versus being on a large firm and kind of going with the flow of what decisions they make. So I think for me, that was actually my single best piece of advice given from another professional.
I think a good piece of advice that I got sort of indirectly from one of my previous employers, just by watching what he did, was just diversity, right? Diversify the type of projects that you pursue and take on. Because for him, his bread and butter was tenant improvements, where some firms may shy away from that. But that's kind of what keeps the lights on, right? In lean times. And then he also explored and dabbled in construction management, which is how I eventually got into managing construction projects. So I think probably the most important piece of advice that I received, even though it was kind of indirectly, was just being diverse in the type of projects that I take on with my firm.
My advice is also indirect. You know, it's kind of funny how you just pick certain things up. But I remember an old boss of mine was kind of describing that, he had kind of worked to build up his networks, and like that, that kind of supported him in making his own business. And, especially as a young person, you don't like necessarily consider yourself overly connected. It seems intimidating. You look at someone with a big firm with a lot of work and you think they know everyone. But it takes time. I mean, some people, are born with that or introduced to that, but I think it's possible for everyone. And I think it's looking at the benefits of what do you have and what you have to offer, and then just kind of slowly, getting it out there, talking about what you want to do, that kind of thing. So.
And I think, Susan, I want to chime in before I lose my thought. I think it speaks to the season of sowing and reaping, right?
Mm-hmm.
You never know when your season is for reaping, but
Totally.
you can always sow, right?
Yeah.
Always be sowing. You never know when it's going to come back, but the laws of the universe, it has to come back.
Yeah.
So you're always sowing. When the reaping comes, when it comes. You don't know when that happens, but you always have an opportunity to sow.
Mm-hmm.
So, the best bit of advice I got, get a competent accountant. You cannot underestimate the importance of understanding business. We are not taught about business in school. As architects, we're emotional. We're happy to go the whole hog. The building must stand. Get your money sorted and make sure that you get it sorted down to your tax, because when they come to audit you, all those things you thought you were, it comes to bite you. I've learned, I had an accountant, but I had an incompetent accountant. I didn't know he was incompetent, which is worse because it's not your profession. So you just think he knows what he's doing and you just let him get on with it. But when you get to audit is when you realize that certain things haven't been done properly. These are the things in business we are not taught in architecture school. And you may be lucky to have had good tutelage from a principal that you worked for. But in many cases, most people who set out on their own don't get the opportunity to sit in management meetings, to sit with their principals, to go for certain meetings, to even know how to present a business card. These are things that we are not taught. Open your eyes, but please, the essence of business is to understand law, is to understand management structure, and to understand your accounts. You really need these things sorted. So important. I've had my fingers burnt. So.
I super agree about that. And even kind of looping it back into the networks, I would say the most valuable people in my networks are accountants. They're like my friend who's a planner. It's people that, I think your fellow architects and your peers and your mentors are also valuable people. But, there's a whole world of people that are doing what they're doing and doing it very well. And like, if you could have a couple conversations, you could learn, as she said, we learn nothing in architecture school about business. And so, like for me, actually, about a year ago, I got a business coach, and that's been extremely transformative. And it's like, especially if you don't have a partner, because there are firms that have partners, and there's some value in that, but there's also, it's another person. It's like a relationship to kind of deal with. But then if you don't have one, it's all on you. So it's nice to have someone to bounce high level stuff off of. So, if you don't have it, figure out a way to get it. It's like whatever you need.
Anson, you had mentioned you had done some sort of a educational thing.
In terms of teaching, you mean?
No, in terms of, well, we'll get to that. But so Susan's got a business coach, but you did a kind of an incubator type thing, right?
Got it. Yeah, with the JMI, the Jim Moran Institute for Business, because I believe Susan was saying, or maybe it was Toshin, as architects, we don't really get trained in running businesses, right? We're almost trained in arts and design and theory, right? We don't take business classes. I don't think we had to take one business course as an architecture student. And that's horrible, right? If you're training to become an architect and running your own business. So I think through networking and just being a part of different organizations, I decided to take that course. It was a small business program with the Jim Moran Institute, and my business has grown tremendously since doing that in 2019. It basically taught me about getting registered with different entities, getting different certifications. So it was a tremendous boost to me personally and professionally, because I met some really good contacts that I'm still in contact with. and they actually assisted me in applying for different things like PPP and things of that nature. Had I not taken that course, I probably would not have been in that circle of influence.
I think that's really amazing. And that's something that I personally picked up during this, the lockdown in March. I found a course in Madrid. It's an online course. It's called the Masters in Business for Architecture and Design. It's a very specialist MBA. And that's why it resonated with me. I'm so conscious of the things that I don't know,
Right.
that I think that if I'm able to empower myself will help to improve my approach in my business.
Right.
Maybe if I understand how the other side think better, it will make it easier for me to do business with them. And I think it's important as architects to know what you know and know what you don't know.
Right, right. And don't be afraid to ask for
Find
help.
those things. Exactly. So important. So important.
So just, knowing you guys a little bit, I know that Susan, Anson, and Tosin, you've all kind of made a clean break, right? And just started your business. But Terry, your company has, you didn't quit your job and start your company. Can you talk about that process and what growing your business has been like in that sense?
Yeah, actually, I am a project manager and architectural designer for a smaller company here that does high-end projects. And the way that it worked out is, after interning with my architect who told me to start the company, I started it and didn't know what to do with it. So it sat for a few years, for 2 years. And then again, because I was working with a small company, we did have that conversation of not, making me an employee, but still keeping me on the team. And that was my way to slide my company in and say, well, hey, can you pay me as a consultant? And that way I can just, provide services and be someone that's on your team. And they supported me in that. They said, yeah, I worked with them for 2 years at that time. They actually gave me the tools that I needed. I was able to project manage projects on my own, do construction documents from beginning to end on my own. So at that point, I was also comfortable in saying, okay, I'm a consultant and I can operate as a consultant because I did have some experience to start networking and doing my own thing on the side and kind of know what I'm doing and not be afraid. And then I also had these amazing mentors who supported me and that I know that I can ask for any help along the way. So that is how I kind of made, it work for me. And I can still to this day, I still work with that company. It's been 5 years. And because I have such a good connection with them, any of my personal projects, because I guess I never mentioned this, I'm actually not licensed yet, 2 exams away, but I'm not licensed yet. So I am operating as an architectural designer. So when someone does come to me and that a project may needs permitting, I can bring it to the company and they will allow me to act as a designer. They act as the architect of record and they trust me enough because I do projects with them anyway. So I think for me, it worked out because I established that trust with them early on. They trained me to learn these things and be able to operate as a great architectural designer and project manager. And that has been very helpful with networking and getting projects on my own. And it's really important that they kind of know where our passions are. Like they know what my passion is to help, local communities and do smaller projects that they don't care about. So that's where I also can, I use my company to kind of bridge that gap as well to say, hey, listen, this is a really cool project, will you mind acting as the architect of record? And they've never said no. They've always said yes. So that is how I'm also continuing to be able to operate on my own and continue to do projects with them and other companies.
I think the
very lucky.
I know.
Yeah, the beauty of this panel is just not just the diversity, but the range, right? And I think what Terry represents is almost that younger generation of architects. They're so fearless. And I think even the class under her, that I see as an adjunct professor, they're so talented. They don't see some of the obstacles that maybe my generation saw and sort of, I guess, engendered as we were coming up. There's sort of a fearless, I think, belief in Terry's generation and the ones coming up behind her.
That's a good sign. That's a good sign.
That I think is really good.
And I just want to jump in. I actually didn't make a clean break. I freelanced for several years while working full time, which, you know, maybe was part of the burnout, but that's a lot of work. But you know, it's an opportunity to like work on different things that, you know, maybe if you're working in one type at work, you can take another project you're interested in, you grow your skill set, you grow your network, that kind of stuff. And then when it came to making that like break, I wasn't as afraid because I had worked on my own and I knew how to get clients. I mean, on my own, I worked for other designers, but like it kind of like took away the mystique of like how is it to get that project, because there is a mental shift that you have to make to like get the project versus like being assigned the work for the project. And that was like, that's something of a challenge that once you can get over, you know, then you're kind of honing your skills in sales and business development and marketing and all that kind of stuff.
I think it's so important, this jump of being able to go from being employed to self-employed. And in my case, I was very scared. There's so much uncertainty, you know, not knowing if it's going to work. Should I just stay where you are, where it's safe? You know, you have a salary at the end of the month. And I told my boss I needed a 3-month sabbatical because I had some personal issues as well I was dealing with. And I have a very good relationship with my old boss, and he agreed. But I used those 3 months to kind of find my space in a very safe environment. Worst case scenario, if it didn't work out, I just gone back to work, you know. You know, I needed that cushion, that safety net. And eventually when I realized that it was gonna work, I went back to him and told him I wasn't coming back. But at least I made a selfish decision that worked for me. And we're still good friends. So
totally, like keep all of those relationships. And then also same, I always told myself, at worst, if I fail, I just get a job, right? So not like I don't have skills. And then also too, just kind of bringing in the flexibility. And, you know, I wanted to start a family and just kind of, you know, it's such a demanding career, and when you're working for someone else, the firm culture is really important. So it's you kind of have to look at, you know, a culture that works for you maybe in your 20s may not work for you in your 30s. And I think it's kind of important to see like what you can plug into, or like if you need to create that for yourself. So.
But Susan, do you know what's really amazing? Very rarely do you find people who step out and go back to work for other people. It doesn't. You will sweat it out. You will sweat it out, even when it's not working. Weird. You're like, nah.
I don't tell
have to see this through. I'm not working for anyone again.
She made a good point. You never want to leave on a bad term, because this profession is extremely small. We all know each other in one way or another. And you never know when you need to circle back around and possibly use that person as a consultant.
Or they send you referrals, or you know, like, you know, it's important. I mean, I refer projects to people. I get projects referred to me. You know, in the end, it's about finding a good fit.
Our business is about relationships. You cannot underestimate the importance. And in many cases, you are not there when they're speaking about you. It is so important to never have anyone say something bad about you, because that can affect your relationship with a potential new client. You could lose a client. You know, you never know where that relationship with another consultant you need to work with is spoiled because another architect has said something negative about you. We can't afford to have bad blood in this profession or have anyone say anything negative about you.
Totally.
You know, something interesting, Terry, you mentioned is being able to pursue your own personal projects, your passion projects, and having the support of another firm to back you as needed. But can all of y'all, and Anson, I'm going to pick on you because I know as an educator, you know, talk about how being your own boss has allowed you that sort of freedom and flexibility that you were just talking about. And, you know, there's a huge
there's a vacuum. There's a vacuum.
So how do you balance that? How, like, why do you do that? Why I know why. I'm a professor at FAU, and I know exactly why I did. But why did you pursue this? Why was it important, and how do you balance that? And how do you balance your own personal values with your business?
Yeah, very, very carefully. I would say when I was I want to say a junior in high school, a student from FAMU came and spoke to my drafting class. He was a Black student, and he was a graduate architecture student. And prior to that moment, I had never met an architect, let alone a Black one who was about to be an architect. And when I saw him and he spoke about the program, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I ended up going to FAMU. And when I went to FAMU, I encountered the statistics and everything. And I thought, you know what, I would like to be a professor to encourage the way I was encouraged, right? So that's the reason I got my master's. And I knew eventually I wanted to teach at some point. But in my mind, I wanted to practice for a little bit first, because some of the professors I had, not to knock FAMU, because I thought my professors were great, they didn't really have that practical world experience. Some of them did, and the ones who did stood out from the ones who didn't. So I knew I wanted that practical world experience prior to teaching. So the opportunity just presented itself. You know, I sat on the board of AIA Fort Lauderdale for several years, and many of those board members were professors, and they'd been asking me for a few years, and the timing was just right. It's a balancing act with teaching and running a firm, but I love it, because I think, like you said, representation matters. You know, if students don't see what's possible, then they probably would not think of pursuing it, right? And even to this day, I still haven't had my first Black student yet, but I'm still working on it. But even still, I think white students need to see Black professors, Black architects, right? Because it works both ways. So I think it's critical that we have a voice and a place and a seat at the table, so to speak, in the education of future architects. And that's why I take it seriously, and it's important to me.
I just want to piggyback off of him. I'm not a professor, but you know, I did go to FAMU, and I just think that going to an HBCU and not having one, you know, studio professor who's of color, it does something to you once you get into the profession, and you kind of realize how different you are, how different you think, and you didn't get not one experience of one studio out of all the hours, all of the projects. You didn't have that kind of comfort to be like, okay, yeah, like I can do this. So I think, you know, what you are doing, Anson and Vanessa, I think it makes a big impact on the students. And it's the only reason why I went to grad school, is so that I can teach in the future. It's the only reason why I went. So, you know, I think I just wanted to chime in as a FAMU alumni as well.
And by the way, I did invite Terry as a visiting critic on my design studio first project presentation this week or last week. I'm losing track of days.
It was this week. It was this week.
Yeah. And you did great. So you have a future at FAU if you want one.
Make those connections.
Like, I also super agree, like, how important teaching is, and the academic portion of our profession is so different from the working portion. So I think it is important for not only there to be diversity, but also people that are currently working. And, you know, being as a critic is something, because for me, it's just like with having a kid and running a firm, it's like teaching is just not going to happen for a few years, right? But it's like a way to stay connected. Also, when you teach, you get the most amazing interns, just FYI. So it's like you get kind of like the pick of the best in your class, which I'm sure, Anson, you take advantage of.
It was sort of serendipitous. Actually, my first full-time employee that I ended up hiring, my first full-time employee who's a junior architect, she actually graduated from FAU in 2019, but it was totally serendipitous.
Wow.
Yeah.
But what about like your other passions for those of you who aren't teaching? How do you balance your other passions, your you know, the projects that you value, the pursuits that you value? Have you ever walked away from a project or a client that just you feel like it wasn't aligning?
I think you gain a wisdom in practice of sensing bad energy people. You know, not everybody can be your client. And I think it's important to know when you meet somebody that this energy is not going to work. They probably will have a great relationship with somebody else, but it might not just be with you. And it's better to leave on a tidy note than to have a bad relationship that they get the opportunity to say something negative about you later. I think it comes with time. I don't think you just know automatically that this is not going to be a good project. Sometimes it's the context of the project as well. Maybe it's too complex, it's very fiddly, it's probably not your area of strength, It could be the person's character, you know. I think it varies for different people, but I personally feel like I've kind of grown to be able to sense when I don't think it's going to be great. There's a project that I recently got called for early January. I had a 3-hour conversation with this client, but there was something he said at the end that made me realize this is not going to work, you know. And we did an initial concept, and I realized then he started being funny, asking for this and that. I just, you know, this is not going to work, and kindly wean myself out of it, you know. This could have been a 2-year down the line horrible situation that I've avoided. But it's from bad experiences. You learn the most from bad experiences with clients.
Yeah.
You know, I have a particular job now that I've had a very long back and forth legal agreement, just the agreement. And I can already sense there's going to be problems, but I'm just like, God, please guide me through this, you know, and don't let my woman emotion come in and affect how I approach the business. And I have to keep telling myself it's business, it's business, it's business, you know. But yeah, you can't work for everyone. You can't work for everyone.
No.
I totally agree on that. And there's, you know, absolutely, you learn a lot from, you know, the bad experiences. So in the beginning, my attitude was kind of say yes to everything, which, you know, got me in a little bit of stressful situations. But I did learn what I didn't want to say yes to in the future. Because honestly, saying no for me is the hardest. Like, especially if I like you, I'm like, oh man, like, let me bend myself in a pretzel trying to like make this work. But I actually, now I made a list of like 6 things that I would love in my ideal project. And there's like a hierarchy. So if like something that's like on the edge, it's not like necessarily a slam dunk, I can kind of like back out from whatever I feel about it and evaluate and say like, is this actually going to work out for me? And if it's like the things that are more important, if it's kind of more into that and I have time, like you can kind of like give yourself some parameters to say yes or no, because it's hard.
Yeah,
Sure.
and I think also what's really important is there's one thing about the character of your client, but there's also the importance of the project. Are you looking to create a diversity of your portfolio of work? You know, if you realize that this is something you haven't done and you think that there's an opportunity that you can spread your skill set, then definitely it's something to consider. I think the more you build your office, you start to think about what you want your agenda as an office to be. What do you want? What kind of projects do you want to be known for? Do you want to start to draw a specific sector so that people start coming to you for being a specialist in that, or do you want to show a diversity in terms of your portfolio? Because then you can spread your risk. If one industry isn't working, then you can pick up, you know, you have a portfolio that shows that you've done projects in this sector. So there's so many things that we're not taught in school that affect how successful a project or a business, I guess, can be.
Yeah, and I think when you first start, you're almost sort of desperate to get that first project. So you kind of take on almost anything, right? But as you grow, like Toshin said, you become a little bit more selective. And I think as Black architects, there's a certain level of respect that we sort of struggle with. I can't speak for everyone, but I know myself. You know, we, how do I say this diplomatically? We may look younger than we actually are, right? So clients may tend to approach you with a certain level of respect. They may not with your white counterpart who is your same age and level of experience, right? So I would basically have dialogues with potential clients where they're sort of asking me questions that sort of intimate that they think I only have a certain level of experience. But when I, expound to them that, look, I've got almost 3 decades of experience, right? And I can do X, Y, and Z. And I give my price, the price is what it is. It's not an intern price. It's not someone with 5 years, 10 years, or even 15 years of experience. It's someone who can manage a project from start to finish, both design and construction. And not many architects can say that, right? So I think as Black architects, we need to be firm in our position, in our stance, in our dealings with clients and potential clients. Because in my experience, I've found that they tend to want to beat down your price because of who they think you are. And you have to kind of remind them of who you actually are.
Yeah, so how do you set that? How do you find out, how do you set what your fees is? How do you compare yourself? How do you find out how much you are going to charge and how do you value yourself?
Trial and error. When you first start out, like I said, you're almost willing to take anything. And for me, I think I just asked a lot of questions from friends that I went to school with who were already in their practices and started their firms, and I would reach out to them. Hey, how would you put a proposal together for project X versus project Y? And they would give me input. I would basically ask a lot of questions from people who are doing what I'm trying to do, basically not trying to reinvent the wheel. And then just research. There's a lot of research out there that kind of tells you, the AIA is a good source. NCARB is a great source as well. So there's a lot of information out there that you can find.
And there's only a certain amount of hours in the day, right? So you
Yeah.
kind of have to look at like a lot of it, like business is basic math. You look at, okay, this is what it takes for me and my staff or whatever, right?
Right.
And this is what I want to make for it to be like not worth my time, right?
Right.
And
Right.
especially I think once you have a kid, I'm like, how much do I need to make to be away from my daughter?
Right. Right.
So, you just kind of like make sure it works. And then I think too, it's important to understand what the client really wants,
Yeah.
because some great advice, like never negotiate against yourself, right? So like if a client doesn't want to like necessarily get some pushback on the fee, it's either they don't understand the value or what they're
Right.
getting. So I spend a lot of time on education, or they just don't value it enough. And I think it's like, for me, I kind of figure out what the minimum is to make it worth it for me. And like, if we can come to someplace in between, great. If not, I walk away. And it took a while to get there, because it's kind of, you've all got your own structure, but it's kind of helpful, because then you don't feel like, because the worst is to start a project and feel like you've lost. I mean,
and that value thing, Susan, it's something that none of us can overcome individually, because it's been there. It's been watered down throughout the years through our profession, right? But we have to be as firm as we can be to let clients know what we're bringing to the table, right? We're not just artists. There's nothing wrong with artists, but we're not just artists, right? We're professionals, we're architects, we're scientists to a certain degree, right? So we have to make sure they understand our value and be firm in that when we're presenting ourselves.
I have a question on this, because this is where we all struggle, and it's great to have this forum where everyone is actually talking honestly about about the money end of things. So what I understand is usually when a client doesn't want to pay a lot of money, it's in some cases some people just give them less construction documentation. I mean, you can build a building from 10 drawings, you can build it from 100 drawings. It depends on how much information and detail you want to provide. Would you be more willing, and this is really for everyone, for a client who doesn't see the value of the additional information, even when you explain to them why you want to give them X number of drawings, would you prefer to reduce the service and get paid, or not take the job?
I just wouldn't take it.
You won't take it?
No, I wouldn't take it, because what happens is if you dilute the service, then you can hurt yourself professionally and legally. Because at the end of the day, when you're reducing that service, they're still going to demand the work, right? And I was going to talk about
very true.
I was going to talk about boundaries, right? I have clients who call me like at 7 on a Friday. I just don't answer, right? They'll call me on 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. I don't answer. Like my office is 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. That's it, right? So we have to get out of that sort of paradigm that architects are starving artists and we work 24/7 and we answer our phones every time the client calls. It's not sustainable, right? So clients who expect you to lower your fees in the beginning, they're going to work you to death. So I just walk away, because for me, time is more important than money. Right? It's the most valuable asset you can have. You can always make money, but you can never make up time.
And I think it's like, and that's kind of where it comes back. I think it's important to define what is the basic level that you define as what it takes to create a great project, right? Because it's like that may be different depending on what the project is, but like if you really care about design and you need those hours on design, you better make sure it's in there, because like you are gonna, even if they don't want it, you're going to put it in there.
Yeah, exactly.
True.
Because you just feel the professional responsibility to do the right thing. And you're not going to cut a project short.
Yeah.
That's where we can fight against our artistic tendencies. Make sure you get paid for it. Because ultimately, like, especially if you're paying someone else, like that means you're going to pay that intern
Exactly.
less. And it's like it's not about you.
Right.
Yeah.
And also for the ladies, it has also been researched and proven that men tend to go after things when they feel partially partially competent and like they partially meet these qualifications, whereas women only go after things when they feel that they are completely qualified for either this project, pursuit, job, or whatever. How do you feel about that? Do you push against that? Is that part of your nature? Is that something that you're aware of? And how do you value yourself equal to your male peers?
I think, to be honest, women are not necessarily risk takers like men. Men will will not know how to solve the problem, but will take it on and solve it anyway. Women say, well, I really am not in a comfortable position. I think, to be honest, to run a business, you do need to be a risk taker. Terry is a risk taker.
Yeah.
She wouldn't have started this business
Absolutely.
back to front if she wasn't a risk taker. Yeah.
She breaks the whole, man.
Yeah.
You have to put your head above the parapet and say, I am here. Nobody on this panel is here if they were timid,
Exactly.
It's not
exactly.
it's not the easier option.
That's why I think architecture actually is an asset, because in architecture you have to figure a lot of stuff out yourself. Like you learn stuff in school, but like 90% of the stuff you work with, you have to learn yourself.
Yeah, we're problem solvers.
Right?
That's what we do.
Yes.
So I always assume I could figure it out, whether I want to or not. Like that's another question. But like if you assume you can figure it out, then like it seems like less of a risk and more just like a problem.
Can you imagine practicing architecture in the 60s?
No.
Oh my goodness.
Internet is a massive resource. When I don't know something, even if I'm in a meeting, I'll quietly go and Google it, there's nothing you can't find these days, Worst case scenario, you can kind of find your way around it and tidy it up afterwards, So we're very lucky to be living in these times, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we are.
Absolutely. Just like technology in general. I mean, I'd say without the level of technology I use, I would never be able to do the amount of projects I can do for a small office. And part of that, like, being, when you work for somebody and like being given too much work, you kind of figure it out. And if you can kind of turn that into like yourself, like how you can kind of generate things and make it a little bit better, it's a huge asset.
Yeah.
Sorry, my wife just got here.
Jerry, tell us about your initiative and the Neighborhood Architect.
Yes, I started a network. I call it a network. It's that locates architects, engineers, urban designers, landscape architects, any professional required to complete a architecture project. And I wanted to do that because, throughout quarantine, throughout everything was going on, I met people who had worked for certain companies that got let go because we don't know why, but maybe, certain reasons. I also just, from my experience, even being in different offices or being able to be on different teams, I've never worked with a minority engineer or a minority civil engineer. And I get asked often from the companies that I work with, like, do you know anyone? Because a lot of these companies, they use the same people over and over just because that's who they work with.
They don't know.
They just don't know anyone else. And so I figured, well, what if I put a network together that locates people they can join? It locates them by map, by location, by profile, or however, and they can easily search like, okay, Florida landscape architect, and it'll pop up their information and it goes directly to them. If you click their name, it goes directly to their website for you to contact them. It's also a way that we can kind of circulate projects throughout each other. Because again, I don't know how often we're able to reach out to engineers, or we're all in our own worlds, which is so weird to me because even in school, I used to say, I'm like, why aren't we doing projects with the engineers? Like, why aren't we passing drawings to them? Because that's what we have to do in the real world. And I just trying to find my little way of kind of connecting everyone in a way that, again, we can circulate the success and kind of be able to have a minority team that's doing a project versus a minority professional that's doing a project. And so it was just a way to locate these different professionals. And I also created, for me, I just thought it would be really cool to create this line of merch that's directly for our professionals. So tubes and hard hats and toolboxes. Like, I didn't know anyone that was designing for us, or like for you to carry and go to work or go to do anything. And that portions of those proceeds go to nonprofit organizations that were created, people of color that are actually dedicating time to give back and educate the youth, to do these programs. And so it was just my way of kind of like giving back to the profession that has been so generous to me early on. And I just, that's something that I tried to.
And that sweatshirt, I need that. I need that in my life.
It is online. It is available for you. It is online. And everything is, look, we're designers. We know how to design. So it is very well, it's most everything.
But do you have a hoodie? I need a hoodie.
I don't, it's crew necks, but I can get you a hoodie. I mean, if you want a hoodie, I can get you one. But it's all like, I wanted so that like people can say, okay, yeah, I bought this sweatshirt, right? But this sweatshirt helped donate to BAM Miami. For their 2021, like every twice a year, I'm donating to different programs and just rotating so that we're all giving back. That's why I call it a network. So yeah, but it's meant but the products are meant for you buy it. It's not gonna like fade away. It's embroidered, so you can keep it. You can. It's just your way of also giving back to these professions. And I always tell people either buy the merch or just donate. They're on the website. There are it lists a few programs, and you can strictly just donate to them. You don't even have to buy the merch if you don't want to, but it's just a way to educate people about all of these programs that are like really putting in the work to educate and help the numbers that you went through earlier, Vanessa. Like it takes all of us to kind of make this change and expedite these numbers, because it's going to take time to get them up. So it's just something that I wanted to kind of give back.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, because we hear over and over again, oh, but do you know a Black architect? Do you know a Black engineer? Making them very accessible and making them visible. So as we start to wrap up and move into the Q&A, there's just a couple of things that I wanted to ask you guys about. One of them is, due to the historic and systemic racism of this country, we know that minorities are in a different economic situation than their white peers. Architecture school is expensive. So how have I think to Terry's point is supporting youth coming up in this profession through these programs like BAM, through scholarship opportunities as well. But then this translates too into the business or startup capital, access to capital, access to startup capital. So how did you guys start your companies? What did you go through? Data shows that actually Black businesses have a difficult time getting loans. 25% of Black businesses who applied for COVID Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, were denied, as compared to less than 10% of white businesses. So can you just, that was a mouthful, but can you like talk about the money side of starting your business, maintaining your business, and getting your business through COVID?
I can chime in. I started, like I said, I was frustrated, I was burned out. I knew I wanted to do it. But prior to getting to that point, I had saved up for it because I knew eventually I wanted to do it. I started with a laptop and a dream, and I had saved up basically a year's worth of expenses to give myself a cushion, because I had no clients. I literally gave, I think, a month's notice to the firm that I was working for. It was a construction firm. I was a project manager at the time. And within that month, I just started looking at previous clients that I had worked with many, many, many moons ago. Had a laptop and a dream and just jumped out there. And, for the first, and I don't recommend this to anyone, I definitely recommend that you see a financial advisor, talk to your accountant about your particular and specific business strategy. But I just jumped out there, and I didn't pay myself a salary for the first 3 to 4 years. I literally, this is my 5th year in business. September will be 5 years. and I just started paying myself a salary last June. So it hasn't even been a year yet. I don't advise that because there are benefits to that. You get more benefits, but I basically was satisfied with paying the bills. But I had very little overhead. I had a laptop, I had a home office, and eventually I got a desktop. And then, to now I have an office space that I pay for and an employee that I'm paying a salary on, and consultants. I actually had consultants at that time when I first started that I would just go to for production work. I think, as Susan said, technology really has allowed smaller firms to do a lot more than we could have done maybe 15, 20 years ago, when Revit wasn't a thing, right? It really has leveled the playing field in the amount of production that a small firm can do. But yeah, that's pretty much how I started, with a laptop and a dream.
I want to chime in because I totally agree as well. I mean, I only had maybe 6 months of expenses, but I like worked to lower my expenses, to kind of just figure out like what's the bare minimum I can kind of give myself some time and space, because you do need time and space, right? Like, in the beginning you are a little bit, like you said, Anson said, desperate, but like you also still want to like have thinking time, and especially if you're quitting because you're burned out, you need to give yourself a little bit of space.
Mm-hmm.
But then also too, I really think, I mean, so my background, I wasn't like an architect I actually studied political science in undergrad. I studied interiors before architecture. So I came in like a little bit later to the profession. So I know like a lot of the world outside of the profession. And I really think that architecture salaries relative to the cost of education are way too low. It's like, why is it cost as much as law school, but then you're paid a lot less? And I think, I think it's important. I mean, a personal goal in my firm is to like have the responsibility to be able to pay people fairly. And that means I need to charge my clients enough so I can pay people fairly.
Mm-hmm.
So I just really think that like, it's something as a profession that like, if you have someone who's like maybe a minority, maybe a first generation college student, like you don't necessarily have a huge safety net of like somebody paying your rent or something like that. So you have to make your own way in the world. And architecture, I think, is very challenging, like right off the bat, because starting salaries are quite low comparative to like maybe your student loan debt. And so I think if we as a profession, especially at the top, can really look at that and look at how we can like, what we can do to either be more efficient and like be able to like raise our fees or something to be able to like pay people fairly across the board, I think we'll all be better in the end.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, that's just my spiel, but I feel very strongly about it.
I completely agree with Anson. I started from, I think I used money from a bonus at the end of the year to buy my first desktop. And I had it for about 6 months before I told my boss I was going to take a sabbatical. And the irony is that the good thing about this profession is because it's based on your intellect,
Right.
you can start with very little. You don't need massive capital.
Absolutely.
If you've got a laptop or a desktop and you can think, and you slowly, organically grow. You get a job, you get a bit more money, you buy another piece of equipment. That's how I've grown as an office. My office started in my guest bedroom in my house, the house I'm sitting in right now.
There it is.
And then when I got confident, okay, I'm making a bit more money, I went to rent an office space. You have to do it slowly,
Right.
You have to grow your clientele, grow your fee base, and then eventually you pull as you go along. And I really like what Susan said. You have to carry people along as well, because nobody can do this work alone.
No.
Let's even forget about the consultants you work with, the engineers, the mechanical, electrical, the structural. In your team, you can't do all the drawings alone.
Yeah, you can't.
That team. I remember staying up to 3:00 in the morning one night, detailing my first project, realizing, this isn't going to work.
No.
You know when that bell goes and you think, okay, well, I think I'm taking the piss now. This is not sustainable.
Yeah, it's not.
But there's that fear of paying someone. That fear that, will I have enough?
No, you have to get over that, because it's it's a saying. Rich people don't work. They think. You have to get to the point to where you can pay someone to do that work that you need to get done. And we're all at the point where, and I had this conversation just today I was speaking to someone. I'm at the point where I should not be producing, right? I should not be managing projects. I should be managing people who are managing my projects.
Which
Because
is
I'm
very
great at
true.
networking, I'm great at getting work, and I'm great at that. But sometimes I turn stuff down because I don't have the people behind me to produce it. So I need to
Yeah.
get to the point to where I'm just out there getting the work and paying people to produce it. And that's
And
where we
while
need
we're
to
on
get.
this topic of paying people to produce, I think architects also needs to think about realistically diversifying your not your business, but how you invest your money. You know,
Absolutely.
it's not
Absolutely.
enough to just work every day like a crazy chicken and you're just going around in a hamster. When you make enough money, take it out and invest it in something else. Please,
Yeah.
it's so important, you know.
Yeah,
Let your money work for you when you're sleeping
absolutely.
and
Passive
continue making
income.
money. This is how to grow
Passive
financially.
income.
So important.
So
And again, something else we're not taught.
Yeah.
in terms of financial growth, I know there's a lot of opportunities that are set aside. So are your firms certified as small business enterprises, minority business enterprise, women business enterprises? Um, yes, no, why not? Is it something that's worth it, do you think? So how would you advise on that end?
I would say go after it, man. I'm going after every certification I'm eligible for. I'm minority certified with Broward County Department of Transportation, Broward County Schools, Palm Beach County Schools. Um, I'm registered with SAM, which is a government entity. And a lot of those certifications came through that Jim Moran Institute, just learning about what were options to me. Because once you're on those lists, then you get calls and connections from larger firms who sort of need to partner with smaller and minority firms in order to meet certain goals with certain projects, right? So I'm in the process of also getting my 8A certification with the government, which is a level of certification that almost guarantees you certain set aside projects. So my attitude is anything I'm eligible for, I'm going to apply for.
So I'm not in your environment, but anything that keeps your head above the parapet, I am here. See me. I'm available for service. Please put your hand up. It's so important. If people see you,
Yeah.
they can ask for your
Well,
service. If people don't know you exist, you
totally.
can't get the
Right.
job.
Yeah.
Exposure,
Yeah.
exposure.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you don't know how you're going to do it. Just do it anyway. Just take it on anyway. You'll find a way.
Yeah. It's very true. Because there's a lot of, especially if you just do good work. I mean,
People will
it's
find you.
shocking how many people don't do good. And not like
Yeah.
necessarily in architecture, but just like in life.
Yeah.
So if you're reliable, you show up,
Right.
like basic
You do the
skills,
basic.
you do the basic, you can excel. It is crazy.
And
So
then
I
Sarah,
don't know.
are you registered as women-owned businesses or minority-owned businesses? Can you talk a little bit just about that?
Me? Oh, I'm actually not. I need to. It's, I have a lot of work, and I actually have a lot of work through a lot of my clients are people of color, Black people. Like, I do a lot in the residential space. I do some commercial stuff too. And it's just one of those things where I haven't gone after governmental work. And so I think, but it's something, Anson's convincing me that it's something that's like definitely, I'm learning stuff on this call too, right? So I
Just pay someone to do the work for you, man.
I
You're going to
know.
grow.
Yeah, you're
Trust
right.
me.
You need to
Trust
send
me.
me that link.
You should not be producing.
Yeah, if it's gonna go to the bottom of my list, and I'm gonna like 6 months later, I'll be like, oh yeah, that thing. So
Yep.
yeah, and like you said, take advantage of anything you can.
Yep.
I mean,
Take
it's
it.
like I have a friend that she's a tax lawyer for the federal government. She used to be, and she would say, if the Mitt Romneys of the world can take advantage of the tax,
Thank you.
so can the Susan Wampers of the world.
Thank you.
That is so true. So just use what you can.
Yeah.
All right, so we are moving on to the Q&A portion. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section, and we're getting through them. So you mentioned those connections and keeping your head above the parapet. So what would you say are those best networking outlets for the Black architecture and construction community? Professional organizations, have they helped you, or what other organizations have you used to promote yourselves and your firms?
So let me give you an example of what I've done. So we have this thing in Nigeria where we don't have a lot of formal structures. A lot of people get work by referral, which I think is what happens also in the US. But what people tend to do is you have people who are middlemen. They're not of any skill, but they won't refer you to someone if you don't pay them a fee. You know, so they know the person who's asking who the architect of this project was. But if you don't actually agree this kind of process of sometimes it's 5% or 10%, they won't refer you. And I made a decision very early on in business that I didn't want to go that route. Because one, I didn't want to be enslaved. And as a woman, you can imagine the other things that come into this the minute somebody feels that they're doing you a favor.
Right.
I went down the line of publicity and getting my work published. Anybody should be able to find me online and send me an email. I'm not going through any of this nonsense, you know, and that's, it's worked for me. You know, if anyone's looking for me, if you see a project that I did that you like, you can find my details, not my telephone number, but my email address. And it's I'm so happy that maybe it was a decision I made in annoyance because someone really pissed me off, but it's worked for me long term for my business. You know, it's gone beyond the realm of just the immediacy of my environment in Nigeria. I'm sitting on this panel because of that. So I think it's so important to document your work. I think it's very easy to kind of decide, oh, you know, it's a small project, I'm not going to photograph it. Look, if I do a 30 square meter, and I know you guys work in feet, 30 square meter space, I document it. I keep telling myself that maybe when my office is 15 or 20 years, I might do a publication book. The point is, it's only new once.
Yeah, don't wait.
Yeah,
Don't wait.
you can't go back to the client and say, oh, by the way, I want to come back and take pictures. No. Once you hand over, you're done. You can't go back in their property. So, you know, it's so important to to document at the right time and just keep in your archives. You never know where it will come in useful.
Yeah,
Whether it's in reference to a new client, showing them what you've done, or to be able to celebrate this at some point in the future.
Yeah, my attitude is now, man. Just do it. You'll figure it out. You know, just jump.
Yeah.
You know, I know I hate to be cliche-ish, but jump and just grow your wings on your way down. You know, I think networking for me was a dirty word when I was younger because I think as creatives we're introverts, right? But I learned that you network just by default. Everyone you meet, you're networking, right? So it's really just your circle of influence and just getting involved in different organizations. When I was at FAMU, I was in Tau Sigma Delta, Alpha Rho Chi, NOMAS, and now I'm still involved with NOMAS, with AIA. So you gain influence by just being a part of these different organizations and serving, you know, service. You know, the universe gives you what you give out, right? The more you give, the more will come back to you. So I highly believe in service and giving to others. And I think we have a responsibility as firm owners to sort of take that next generation behind us to where we wanted the generation ahead of us to take us, right? To be that influence, to treat them fairly in terms of salary. You know, we're in a position of power, right? So in terms of pay equity, right? So we have an opportunity to be that change that we want to see happen. So make sure that the employees we bring on, that we pay them fairly. So I know I'm talking about different things, but I tend to get passionate about this stuff.
I want to chime in on what you said, Anson, because you brought up how active you were at FAMU, and I think that was the good thing about going to an HBCU, because if you were an introvert, like, you learned to kind of get out of that. And I think especially now as the younger generation, we network like crazy through social media, through all these things, and it plays a good role in our advantage. So me learning how to kind of speak up early on, I got nominated to be AIS vice president. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what am I gonna do? Like, you know, but it was a really great experience. I moved on the next year to become the president. I met my first mentor through a legislative day. He was 2011's AIA Florida's president, and he guided me for 6-7 years until he, you know, passed away. But, you know, I was able to go to the AIA grassroots and meet all these other chapters, which was not of color. And we were also able to, when I was president, we were able to go and do the AIS South Quad Conference, because they broke up in quads. And we actually won the design competition. We're the only Black, chapter to ever win. And so when you're doing those things early on and you're like learning how that networking works, it helps you like build a little bit more confidence. And even now, being in NOMA, being in AIA, I also for 2 years, I was a part of Crew Miami here, which is it's an organization of women who are in real estate, right? Like that helped me. Or people like, oh, well, we may need an architect. So I think our generation, like just they're with social media, they're just like little butterflies, right? And for us too, as architects, like we're just not really good in that area. Like we're just kind of like, I tell people all the time, I'm a low key geek. So don't, I would rather stay, I just would rather stay on my computer all night.
Right.
And that's just who we are, and what from school, and just our characteristic builds off of that.
Like my wife calls me a nerd.
I'm a nerd. I tell people all the time, I'm a nerd.
I gladly accept it. But
the good thing about social media is that you are able to be yourself, like be your nerd. And there are so many other nerds just like you. Exactly. So it helps really well. So I just kind of wanted to chime in on the networking part.
I kind of also wanted to like chime in and zoom out on that, and just like, I guess I kind of look at networking as just being curious about the world around you and like just being interested. And so whenever you're in conversation with someone, especially someone
you're networking. Yep.
Yeah. And so
you're
it's
networking.
Like, if you don't
it doesn't have to be a specific function that you're going to for a purpose.
The word can be like a little scary, but it's really
overwhelming.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what would you guys say? This is a two-part question. What would you say would be the hardest thing about starting your own firm, and what would you have done differently when you were starting?
I'd say the hardest thing is just making the decision. And then
I agree.
No, seriously, anything you do, the hardest part is just making it. And once you decide, once you've made that decision, you realize it wasn't that big of a deal. Sort of like every step, right? Like probably the thing about life is a series of attempts to accomplish specific projects, right? Whether it's high school graduation, college, pledging, getting your license, starting a firm, it's different levels. And once you make that decision, the light clicks on, right? So that's the hardest part, is making the decision. And I think what I would have done differently, oh wow, that's a tough one. I don't know.
It is a tough
one. I enjoyed the journey, man. Because I would not be where I am had I not experienced what I did.
The failures form you, to be honest. The failures form you,
Yeah.
You learn more from them than the successes.
Yeah. And you never fail until you quit. Like failure is a part of success. You'll never fail until you quit.
Yeah. For me, I don't know. Again, I was kind of encouraged, so I don't think that I would replace that for anything. But I just would say that there are things that come when they're supposed to happen. I want to say I began interning my sophomore year undergrad, and I went through a lot of, whether it was just in the summers or whatever. I wanted to like kind of tap in with all these different professionals. And I specifically remember, and I'm going to say this because I know it's really important to hear about the failures too. And I remember getting hired here in Miami for a Colombian architect. He hired me to do renderings. And that's what my portfolio was from school. It was renderings. He specifically hired me for renderings. And 4 weeks in, it was great. And he was like, okay, you're doing really good. I want you to do construction documents. This was before, I never done construction documents before. And it was in CAD. I had been working in Revit. I've never touched CAD before. I had worked in Revit from my sophomore year. So I'm like, not only was it just the drawings, it was the program too. And after 2 days of me not getting it, he fired me. And I wasn't even hired for that. But the same night, that same day is when I got hired by the Black female architect. I don't even think she knows that story. But so things happen just the way that they're supposed to happen. I remember being in tears And I'm such an ambitious person that I'm very, very competitive. So I'm like, okay, you know what, forget this. I'm going to, and I did what I always do. I went down a list and emailed a whole bunch of architects. She called me, and the next day I was in her office, and look how it changed. So,
And for him to do that speaks more about him than you.
Oh yeah.
yeah, I was just like,
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God. But again, I would have never met, Juliana Tuma. I would have never met her if that would have happened. And moreover, I wouldn't have gotten the advice that I was given. So I just wanted to like throw that out there because your process is what it is. It's going to be, but you're going to get to wherever you're
Where you're
supposed to be.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, a lot of you talked about burnout being a part of your decision to start your own firm and to do something at your own pace and for yourself. So what kinds of practices do you have in place, or you trying to get in place in your own firms to not replicate this type of environment that creates burnout that you've experienced in other places?
9 to 5, no weekends. No, I'm serious. No weekends and 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Like my employee, she contacts me on the weekend. Like I don't reach out to her. Like she's that driven about what she wants to do. And I may have things that I need to give to her, but I don't contact her after 5 o'clock on a Friday. That's just it. It's like you have to have boundaries, right? And
Also,
treat people the way you wanted to be treated when you were in their position.
Also, like you just won't make it in the long haul, right? So it's like I have a 1.5-year-old who gets up at 5:30, and if I'm lucky, 5:45. And so it's like I go from day to night, and then I realize I used to work through the weekends, and like I literally will not make it. Like you just can't.
It's not sustainable. It's just not.
Yeah.
It's not.
I mean, I'm not great during the week. We probably do 9 to 7 or 9 to 8, but as principal, no weekend work, because I think it's so important that there's as much as possible balance. Architecture is a very time-consuming profession. I mean, I worked in Rotterdam for Office of Metropolitan Architecture from Koolhaas. I used to leave the office at 2 a.m. as a junior architect. I mean, this was like slavery, but I learned a lot. But it was clear that the average age in the office was about 28, 29.
Wow. Yeah.
It was, I mean, the partners and the team leads don't stay late.
Yeah.
But it was like a culture, and if you didn't stay, you felt bad.
Right.
Because your team members look at you like, oh, you can't believe it. But I was very conscious. I didn't want that. I had a rash when I first got there because I hadn't slept properly for like 2 weeks.
Wow.
It was very, very intense. I learned a lot, and I'm thankful for the experience, but I won't do it again. And I don't think it's fair to put people through that, to be honest.
Exactly. Now, even though I say 9 to 5, I'm not really speaking about myself. I'm really speaking about my office and whoever I employ or consult with. But for me, I'm literally 24/7. I'm not even gonna lie. So there are weekends. There are no weekends that I take off. I'm constantly doing things to better the firm.
But the beauty about it is it's your choice.
Yeah, it's my choice.
You decide to wake up at 2 a.m. and sketch a building. You decide, because there's something beautiful about it being your choice.
It's my choice. Yep, it's my choice. Exactly.
And so, in terms of the learning curve, we don't learn business in school. Barely learn architecture in school. But insurance, that's like a whole nother can of worms. So how hard was it to learn about what the insurance needs for your practice were, and getting everything situated in terms of insurance? And
not too hard. I mean, like when you study for the California exam, they tell you the type of, like the California board tells you what insurance you need. You don't need all of it as like I started out as a sole proprietor, or if you don't have like employees, but like it is important. And you kind of, insurance, I think, is that one thing where you're like, oh man, when I'm liable for a project, I'm liable for a project for like a certain amount of years, right? So I need to have insurance for a time. So I think that can be an intimidating factor. But I do think it is important to have. But then also, like I've heard of people that just choose their clients really well, just make sure, but I don't know. I think insurance is important. You need errors and omissions.
Yep.
Later, you need general liability when you get a little bit bigger. If you have employees, you need workers' compensation. If you don't, you don't, and you need car insurance. I mean, that's really that, and there's people that can kind of tell you.
Exactly.
So how'd you learn about it? Where'd you find out about it? Who told you?
Well, California, the board, the board. And then, it's like, I think I asked like old people I worked with, like my boss or just like, what do you got? And then like, and insurance goes by how much coverage, right? So if you're doing like tiny projects, you don't need more than
they'll tell you how much coverage you need. And I just reached out to, like I said, my 2 friends that I went to FAMU with, they were already practicing. So I just reached out to them and just went from there. And even from the company that I used to process my payroll, the same thing. I reached out to another friend who's an architect who has payroll. I said, hey, who are you using? And I reached out to them. So it's literally, you reach out to someone who's doing what you're trying to do. There's no need to try to reinvent the wheel, but always do your research and make sure it's a good fit for your firm.
And also going back to pricing your services, you have to include the cost of insurance, like include the cost of if you have an office, include the cost of like software, getting a new computer. And that is like baseline in your fee as well, because that like you shouldn't be like business is supposed to be profit. You shouldn't be paying to work, right?
Right,
So
exactly.
unless you're doing it for like a passion project or like a, publicity or something, right? So if it's not working out in the end, like you probably shouldn't be in business because you could do better working for someone else,
There it is.
So yeah, numbers don't lie.
No, they don't.
Very true. I don't know. So in Nigeria, you've mentioned a whole load of different insurances, but what we have is professional indemnity insurance. Is that the same thing as what we're talking about
Personal
here?
liability, probably.
Okay, that's what you guys call it. So there's certain projects that have it, you can't do the job. Obviously, the higher up the job is, certain clients, especially if the client has investors, these are things that they will check. So it's in your interest to have it. And then they will value it based on your workload and specifically for that project. And then they will advise you what your premium should be.
Yeah, and certain projects, like you said, Toshin, if you're going after that, the insurance company you have, you can up the level based on the project you're going after. You can always increase it.
That's what happened to me. I started with just like errors and emissions, like basic level, and then I got like a higher profile client. I got like a corporate project, and they're just like, "You need to have this much insurance," and I said, "Okay."
Okay. Just pay an extra $5 a month. There we go.
All right. So as we wrap up, some fun questions. What Black architects or Black firms serves as an inspiration to you in establishing your own?
Wow.
Gosh, that's a tough one.
So I was actually recently asked who my favorite architects were, and I mentioned to Dow Ando, and then the follow-up question was no women. And so the response to that is I too am a victim of the white male Eurocentric architectural education.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we didn't learn a lot. I mean, to be honest, I didn't really have like a favorite famous Black architect. I was fortunate enough to work for one. And he was actually fortunate enough to go after a project with Phil Freelon at one point. So those were kind of the guys that I look up to, right? I looked up to at that time. I think Joseph Middlebrooks back in the day as well. Neil Hall, obviously, down here. Ron Fraser. Those were the guys that were locally. But like you said, Vanessa, we didn't really have a good dose of examples of Black architects.
I mean, I live in LA, and like our most famous architect is Paul Williams, right?
Right.
I didn't know Paul Williams until like, I don't know, 8 years ago or something, which is crazy. He's so prolific. It's just, it just that wasn't like included in the architecture 101 and 102. So, when you're just trying to work, once I left school, it wasn't like I was looking around. So, a little bit of that is definitely on me. But then, it's kind of back to like the education. Like, if you don't know, how are you going to find out? Luck.
So I'm going to give the cliche answer because it's kind of obvious. David Ajayi is such an inspiration. He's done so well in the profession. He stood out, and I love his energy. That man is a PR machine. that guy understands media and he has positioned himself to a T. I remember going to Washington to the Smithsonian, and I mean, I did a pilgrimage for a building. I mean, that's sad. All the way from Lagos. 3 flights, London, New York, then Washington to see a building, but it was so beautiful. And to be able to see an architect of color who has achieved so much in his lifetime and has been celebrated in that, I think and this is what we're talking about. It's about placement. There are generations of kids who will see that and say, I can do that.
Yeah.
You know, and that's all that we all need, you know, to see somebody that looks like us, that's able to achieve. And personally, because he's from Ghana, it also resonates even more for me.
Yeah.
You know, he's crossed over into the West, you know, from Ghanaian roots, done well there, and then gone international. I mean, it's an amazing success story.
Yeah. I know if you would have asked me 5 years ago, I would say Zaha Hadid, because that is like, you know, female for me. But as I've gotten older, you know, I've realized, you know, the characteristics of an architect is what makes a good architect. And so for me, Juliana is my inspiration, you know, because, you know, again, to this day, I don't do anything, and I mean anything, without calling her and asking her. It's really the mentorship that she provides. And it's not only for me, but for everyone that, you know, she hires as an intern. And that's what she does. She hires, you know, minority interns. She trains them for a year and then literally kicks you out and like, okay, go, so I can give someone else an opportunity. So I think for me, she's my favorite architect. But one of my inspirational architecture companies that is Black owned is Fitzgerald Collaborative. I think they're one of the oldest Black owned companies to date, if I'm not mistaken, or one of the oldest, but I believe he was the first. And it's a big company. He has an office in Tallahassee and then an office in Atlanta. So those are my two.
So speaking of the, you know, educating and the next generation, any advice you would give to an architectural technology student moving into 4-year architecture programs? What advice do you give to the future of our profession?
I would say interns when you're in school as much as possible, like get a huge variety of experience. I mean, I graduated my grad program like during a recession, and you know, I had to be extremely scrappy and work at a bunch of different firms, but like because I had worked during school, I had actual skills, you know, and so that carried me through a lot, you know. So I think, and also you meet people. I mean, there's people I met when I was like 25 that I still work with, you know. So I think getting into the profession, because the school can be so separate from the profession, and so like even if it's something random, like find a job on Craigslist or something. I found a job on Craigslist before, you know, so it's like just getting into the profession is like a huge, I think, asset when you have, I know you don't have time in school, which is a huge problem, but like if you can get in and just like meet people or just do any sort of job.
Yeah, I would say for students, like don't get caught up on it's hard to find an internship thing. Like it is, you know, it's challenging, just as challenging as any other, and it's because of the experience. But, you know, I tell people I've gotten all of my internships opportunities from 2012 all the way up until Juliana and the other companies that I've worked with is I create a little spill, right? My name is Terry Watson. I'm looking for a paid internship. My availabilities are this day and that day. Attached, you will find my resume, my portfolio. Please let me know if you have any other questions. And that's it. Like architects, they don't have a lot of time to read stuff. And I literally went in Google, typed in architecture firms. If I like the website, I emailed that to the principal, and that's it. And I've gotten every single opportunity, every job that I've had that way. So I think it's like, have the same attitude as that, okay, I'm looking for it and I gotta find it. Don't wait for a company to post, because jobs come across architect firms' desks randomly all the time, and your email just may be at the right time. And it's like, hey, you know, I actually need someone to help. Okay, let me see if I can get this person opportunity. And they're just gonna look at your portfolio and see if you understand. And that's another conversation, right? Your portfolio should show that you understand the basics of just whether it's down to text, clarity of drawing. So as a student, kind of make sure you understand how to present yourself for opportunities too. I think that's really important. But as a student, just continue. I tell people all the time, I'm still a student of the profession. Continue to be a student of the profession. We're in a era where, or in a career that things change. It's innovative, so you have to keep learning. So just, that's the only piece of advice that I could give.
And to add on that, like, firms keep your information. Like, I got a great job they called me. I had applied for an internship like years ago, and then they were looking for a junior designer, and they were going through, like, maybe it wasn't the right time then, but they might contact you later. So always try.
Yeah, for sure. And that actually brings us to one of our last questions. As an owner, are there any books, podcasts, resources that you have on rotation? How do you stay sharp in the industry and up to date on trends, technology, and techniques?
I can cheat that question because as an owner and in the process of being licensed, I'm doing nothing but reading. So I think, start doing that process early, right? Like looking at the ARE and seeing those books that they recommend as far as like, cause it's a realm. It's again, it is the practice management of it and running the business and how to pay out. It is the roles that you'll have to take on. And then it is just, books I should be reading. And someone gave me a good piece of advice, like just read to learn and be a good professional. Don't read to pass the test. And, I think that's a good way as far as like, learning how to be an owner of a business.
I think I don't have anything particular I listen to or read, but I have a very big interest in just general knowledge and history. And I think it's so important. Architecture about experience. You can't design from a vacuum. You can't, there's so much of the world around us that influences our work. And I think it's really important as an architect to have a good, diverse knowledge of a lot of many things. In fact, architects should be the best dinner party guest. You should be able to talk about any and everything. Current affairs, history, politics, I think also it's very important to keep a strong network of people who are more experienced than you, who you can go to for advice. They might not be your closest of friends, but the kind of people you can call when you are struggling with something professionally, and that they have your genuine back and they will give you good, honest advice. That's really, really important.
Yeah, I think for me, I listen to a lot of non-architecture related things, podcasts, motivational. I mean, I'm currently listening to Born Rich, John, I forgot his name now, it escapes me. But a lot of motivational things inspire me. And just staying on track of technology. I mean, Google, and I have, my junior architect, she's pretty much on top of things. And the organizations I'm a part of, just being around younger architects, talking to them, trending topics, trending techniques, and just staying on top of cutting edge things. But I think as an owner, you have to avoid getting the burnout sort of that I experienced for starting my firm. And the way I do that is by just listening to motivational things. And I think for me, like we said earlier, you're passionate about what you're doing. Like I said, the 9 to 5 doesn't really apply to me because I love what I do. I'm literally 24/7. Like I literally have to pick a time to stop. Like every night I'm up till at least 11:30 doing something related to bettering the firm, whether it's reading an article or, researching something about a technology or a project I'm working on. But the learning never stops.
Yeah. Can I just add, the book that I'm reading now is called Homo Deus, a brief history of tomorrow by Noah Harari. So really interesting. It's about technology. It's about tomorrow. It's about, global warming, how man is going to be taken over by a machine if we're not careful. But, it's so important, general knowledge, so important.
Oh, Bob Proctor, that's the one. Born Rich, his series. I think I'm on number 4. Everything's on YouTube.
And yeah, I mean, I think I also like same. It's like follow a lot of non-architecture like entrepreneurs and kind of like read or listen to their things. Like I've done a lot of reading about real estate development and kind of like
Yeah.
side of things because that's really interesting. Even to like know how different people that are in your specter like think and operate. And so because it's like the better you can give your client or something exactly what they want, the more likely they're to value you. And
Right.
then, books about marketing or just like podcasts are great. I mean, podcasts are amazing.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. So, very general, but there are actually some interesting books about business and architecture as well. Like I can't think of any right now because it's been a while. But when I first started my firm, I was reading everything. I was like, how does this work? You just kind of Google it.
Yeah, the Architect's Handbook is like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good resource
That's
as well.
a very good one.
Yeah.
Sure.
So there are actually a lot of questions that we were not able to get to.
Sorry.
And so if you guys don't mind sharing your contact info in the chat so that attendees might be able to reach out. But I do want to take a moment and thank our sponsors, Interior Contract Services, for being our sponsor yet again. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for attending. And then kind of wrapping up on resources. There are a bunch of resources out there. So there is, I put it, BIPOC Studios, Google it. There's a Google spreadsheet, add yourself. They're creating a list of minority and female firms around the country. Blackarchitect.us lists all the Black architects in the country who are licensed. So check out all these websites, theneighborhoodarchitects.com. And then if you're interested in these disadvantaged business enterprise programs, FDOT has this statewide certification. So check out these websites. Check out.
That's a great certification. I have that one.
Yeah, definitely check it out and go to soflonoma.org/resources for our reading list. So any suggested books we add on there. So yes, thank you everyone for coming. Panelists, if you want to very quickly, one last parting word, one last takeaway for all of our guests. So Tosin, you want to start with you?
I think it's so important to know who you are. As you're getting to the end of your architecture course and you're going into the real world, you need to have conviction of self. Don't be cocky, but be confident. It's so important. There's so many ways that you're going to be knocked along the road, but be clear on what you want to get out of this and you will achieve it.
Yeah, exactly. I think, try to find, even if you're in a situation you're frustrated in, try to find the best, try to create like, what would you like to be the best outcome to be in any scenario and see if that can happen for you. And if not, like move on or, but also know yourself is really important. I agree.
Sorry?
Believe in yourself. As I same as Susan and Tosin, being yourself will get you further than you believe. I've been true to that, and I think that's a testimony. So definitely just believe in yourself and be professional, but be yourself.
And I think know your worth and set boundaries, right? You teach people how to treat you, right? Set your price and add tax to it. You know what you're worth.
Awesome, thank you.
Exactly.
All right, thank you everyone. This has been another episode of Inside Voices Black Thoughts. Join us next month. This is a monthly series, details coming soon. So thank you all for joining us tonight, and I hope to see you again